Welcome back for another book review. I can't show you the book today because it is one that my library had to borrow from a different library. I had this one other time before. This is the one that I actually had requested first, and then the other one was a surprise. This is the Everything Wicca and Witchcraft Book by Skye Alexander. I believe that's the title. The official one will be on the video description title blah 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 below. But yeah, this is an interesting book for me. So this is technically a reread, but it's been a long time. So this was my first witchy book. So I had picked this up from the library eons ago, back in like 2009 when I was a wee little witch at 13, and this was one of the very few books I could find in our small little library that we had locally, and I read through it, and my opinion hasn't really changed. So despite it being like 14 years later, this book is just, it's okay. It's not the greatest. And honestly, having read as many books as I have, because I've read like at least getting close to probably 200 witchy books at this point, minimum, since I started keeping track. So I've read a lot of them, and naturally I've read a lot of beginner books. And this was like, okay, it's not the greatest, and having it be my first book kind of put it in an interesting perspective of like, how much did this really influence my craft now, all of these years later? And it's like, my opinion hasn't drastically changed. So the things that are the same is that, like, when I was first reading through this all those years ago, I wouldn't say I was like an expert, obviously, but my friend had told me a lot about Wicca by that point, and we were also reading House of Night. If you don't know, that's a vampire series that was popular back in those days for teenage girls, and they have heavy Wicca influence, and like eclectic Wicca mixed with some just teenage YA, but whatever. So like, not the greatest example, but that's where we started, okay? And also like some Googles and stuff, you know, finding little bits here and there, websites that are defunct by now. I think only a couple of them are still around. So like, I was doing some research up to that point. And when I got to this book, not everything was lining up immediately. Like, there was this thing that they kept going back and forth. Is spirit an element? Is it not? Is it included? Is it not? And it was so wishy-washy. And that hasn't changed, really. And it's still the thing, because it's like the zodiacs, none of them fall into the category of spirit. Yet we cast circle with it. And like, it comes and goes. And like that book, I just was like, but why? Pick a lane. Like, what do you mean it's like sometimes an element and sometimes not? Still to this day, I still had the same thought. Like, I've come to accept it now, but it was nice to know that some things never change. Some of the correspondence tables I loved back then. I used them for a few spells when I had the book in my possession before I had to return it to the library, and I felt the same now. I think it was different correspondence tables, but I was like, I kind of like this, actually. This is kind of intriguing. Like, it's just some of them where you're like, I could refer back to that. Like, you know, just adding to the never-ending, like, Book of Correspondences book of shadows, because I don't have a singular book of shadows. I have multiple. Getting close to like a dozen, honestly. One of these days I'll have to do the books of shadow tour, not just the singular anymore, because it's expanded a lot. But, you know, a couple of those things were pretty interesting. Most of the information was pretty super generic. It started off being like, well, witches do this and Wiccans do this, and then it just kind of progressively just stopped doing that about halfway through, maybe even a third of the way through, which was like, okay. But, I mean, really, it's a Wicca book, and, like, the information's okay. It's not revolutionary. And the thing is, because I have read so many books now, there's some that are better. Like, it's so weird to say, because there are some classics, some old classics, Scott Cunningham, Some of Silver Ravenwolf's, Raymond Buckland, like you got your classic names that it's like inevitably, even like Starhawk, like there's your core books that inevitably you probably are gonna read, and like some of those really hold to the test of time. Raymond Buckland is still great if you're looking into more traditional Wicca. If you're wanting eclectic, just kind of folk magic style, like Scott Cunningham's the way to go. Silver Ravenwolf is a little bit more light and airy-ish. She's not as like super serious, ceremonial deal, you know, she's a little more chill. And her target audience for a long time was more like teens and young witches. And like, that's fine. She's kind of adjusted a little bit, but like, she also doesn't write as much anymore, so. But anyways, so like some newer authors, you know, like, and even then they're not really new, but like Christopher Penczak and Deborah Blake, like they're kind of the forefront for a lot of books now. And they're really big in like the witchy community. I mean, Penczak is running his own thing. I mean, you could also include Selena Fox. She's got her own deal. I don't know if she has any books written though. I've never actually looked. Anyways, so, but the example being, when I think of the beginner books that I would recommend, and I do have a spreadsheet that has them listed, not all of them. I'm still working on compiling it because I decided to do it like halfway through the year. So it's an ongoing thing that'll be done by the end of the year. But the thing is, I just feel like some of the newer ones are better. Because listen, a lot of the information really hasn't changed in the almost like 20 years since this book has been out. I don't know, it had 2 copyright dates, so I don't know when it officially came out, because it had 2002 and 2008. And the library stamp said 2008 too, so I don't know. But if we run off of 2002, it's 20 years old. If we run off of 2008, it's almost there. Either way, it's getting to be an older book. And, you know, Penczak's books came out at that time as well, and I feel like his are better. And the newer ones from, like I don't remember if it was this year's, I think it was last year's new book from Deborah Blake, her, like, eclectic Wicca book, or witchcraft book or whatever. That one that she recently did, that I feel like is a better book. There's quite a few, honestly, that are just better. And I say this because the basic information is the same across the board. This does cover a lot of random stuff that not every witchcraft book is going to do, but we do have a bigger discussion now on cultural appropriation versus cultural appreciation. And like, this book, to be fair, it really, like, I was getting so tired, like halfway through the book, it kept explaining feng shui is like an ancient Chinese thing. Feng shui, it is this ancient Chinese thing, and you're like, oh my god. Same with like I Ching. I don't know if that's how you're supposed to pronounce it, if it's I Ching, because they try to use the phonetical pronunciation thing, but that doesn't always help. I've always heard it I Ching. But that divination system, they always just attach constantly, which is like, whatever. But they try and cover everything at like a super baseline level, which is like, whatever. We've all been there. We've read that in the beginner books. Some don't include all of those details, others do. It just depends. But like, going into all of these random bits, they also don't include like really important stuff that modern books are. So like, the thing with crystals, that was the most relevant one of like, hey, don't tell people to just wash all their stones in soap and water. It's not going to go well if you do that to your selenite. That's going to really ruin your day, especially if you paid a lot of money for one. And if you leave your beautiful amethyst to soak under the sun and the moon for a moon cycle, you're going to be really disappointed when it suddenly looks like a mutated little clear quartz thing. Like, it might not go completely clear in that time, but it's going to get discolored. Especially if you got a dark one, then you're going to be like, what happened? Because, like, some don't need to be in the sun. And so it's just, like, random stuff like that. And, like, the very blatant warnings of, like, hey, this plant is super toxic. Probably don't go near these ones, okay? Guys, let's not do that. And, like, hey, did you know that if you're pregnant and or breastfeeding, don't touch. Just don't touch these. Like, there was really none of that the modern books are like, and I'm thinking modern, like maybe 2015 onwards, those books tend to really push that point that this one was like, eh. And it's like, I don't know, it's one of those things where modern books I feel like kind of cover it better, and again, it's just kind of just surface level scratching. It doesn't really go into anything. It also doesn't teach you to do anything despite being so big. It's just like, well, you could do this, or you could do this, or you could do this, or you could do this, and some people do this, and other people do this, but it doesn't actually tell you what to do. So, I'm stuck on the same point that I was 14 years ago, where it's like, okay, and then you just move on to the next one. And so, I don't know, it's kind of weird to read your first witchy book 14 years later, But yeah, that's my opinions really haven't changed all these years later. Much of my core beliefs have kind of adjusted and just settled differently than then. But like, it's still just kind of meh. So anyways, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this book in the comments down below. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I try to post every single day. And until next time, thank you so much for watching. Blessed be.